Afternoon. Boa tarde. This, in case you're lost, this is the side event of the Brazilian Coalition on Climate, Forest, and Agriculture. And we're very honored to have in our panel, I'll start the introductions from my right. I'd like to first introduce Ms. Katia Simeonova from the UNFCCC subsidiary body for implementation and manager of the Mitigation Data Analysis Program of this conference, and she's representing Ms. Patricia Espinosa. We, on her side, have Ms. Ethel Sennhauser from the World Bank Agriculture Global Director of the World Bank. And then here on my side, we have Barbara Buchner from the Climate Policy Initiative Institute, and she's the executive director. And to my left, we have Minister Blairo, Minister of Agriculture of Brazil. And at the end of the table, Minister Sarney, Filho, Minister of Environment of Brazil. So I want to first thank you all for coming to this event. And the way we organize the event is that we're going to start with remarks that will be between 5 and 7 minutes by each panelist. And then we're going to have a discussion. After that phase, we'll entertain a few questions from the audience. And my suggestion is that we intercalate questions from people from other countries and questions from people from Brazil, so we ensure that we get the full spectrum. The idea of this plenary, of this session, is to discuss the implementation of the Brazilian NDC. As you may be aware, the Brazilian NDC is a Brazilian that is very focused, or has a very important role for land use. So forest and agriculture play a very important role on this implementation, and we're here to discuss challenges, opportunities, but moreover, gather what are the suggestions, advices, and engagements that we could encourage and stimulate to happen, because the task is a task that we should entertain the idea of doing with more people than just Brazil. So I would like to open the debate, inviting Barbara to give her initial remarks. And just so you know, Luana, who's sitting right there, will be your friendly timekeeper. Thank you.
Wonderful. Obrigada. Thank you so much for having me here. And I do apologize. I'm one of those who do not yet speak Portuguese. But I am very committed to hopefully learning Portuguese also because, Brazil is an extremely important country in making sure that we enable our world to get on a low carbon climate resilient pathway. So what I'd like to do today in my opening remarks is actually talking about one way that we at Climate Policy Initiative hope to be supporting Brazil in implementing their NDCs. And the way we are doing that is actually based on a specific stream focused on Brazil of a public-private initiative that we are managing at CPI. This public-private initiative is called the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance. The Innovation Lab identifies, develops, stress stage, new innovative catalytic financial solutions that really are able to unlock private investment at scale in emerging economies. And since launching in 2014, the lab actually has been endorsed by the G7, and we've managed to help fundraise almost $600 million for a number of concrete pilots around the world already, and that is in a little over 18 months. And we managed to do that across different sectors and areas, energy efficiency and land use, but in renewable energy, and like having a specific focus this year also on cities and resilience. And it really is just to show that there is a number of successful lab examples out there. And I would like to just briefly mention two examples to give people an understanding of what are the types of instruments that are being developed. And so one of them is an energy savings insurance. That energy savings insurance actually ensures the monetary value of energy efficiency savings on electric bills. And that has been taken forward by the Inter-American Development Bank, one of the lab members, and has been piloted in Mexico and replicated in Colombia, and actually just got approval for funding for a third project in El Salvador from the Green Climate Fund. So the idea of this lab is really to come up with pilots, the first of in its kind, and then help them get replicated around the world to really come up with new modes of unlocking private investment and scale. Another instrument which has the potential for a country like Brazil, giving the strong focus on land use, is something called the Climate Smart Lending Platform. And that platform brings together the tools, the actors, and the finance to really mainstream climate smart metrics into the lending portfolios of local financial institutions. So the idea is really to, at one hand, like, increase the access to capital for smallholders, to some types of loans that really take into account the need for smallholders to adopt climate smart techniques, but at the same time also train banks, commercial banks, to really take into account this, the metrics of climate smart lending, and through a credit scoring tool in their own portfolios. And in this way, they really can increase also the resilience of their lending platforms and portfolios. And but I don't want to tell you only about the lab, the global lab. I think the exciting news is that we have just launched last week a specific Brazil lab. So we have, with the support also from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Environment, and under the auspices of the US-Brazil Climate Change Working Group, we have launched this new specific lab work stream that really is focused on identifying new financial instruments that can help Brazil to implement its NDCs. So the focus will really be to come up with specific instruments that are for the context of Brazil, that are developed by the Secretariat, but are crowdsourcing from those, you all in our audience here, and many others that really know what are the needs in Brazil, and therefore come up with solutions that can help really come up with replicable, scalable models that can help get us on a pathway towards the goals of Brazil's NDC. So I very much look forward to hearing more about the priorities and the real goals of Brazil's NDC, because I do think that this has proven to be a model that really can bring together public and private investors and use public seed funding most effectively to unlock other private investors. And so I think I'm going probably to stop here. I do want to say that we have at the moment this call for ideas open. It's open till the 16th of December. We have some more material also in Portuguese for those of you that are interested. The call for ideas is open at www.climatefinanceIdeas.org. And we really hope that we get a lot of good submissions and can then work with you to really refine some of these ideas to get them to bankable projects very quickly and get them from concepts and talk to action very quickly. And I just want to finish to say, why should you apply? Why should you submit your ideas? What we do is actually we are a kind of a technical assistance unit. So we provide about $150,000 of in-kind analytical support to really do the financial structuring, really come up with models that can work. And we then help you access through the networks that we have and the members of the lab, which are these public and private investors, really access some of the funders and really make sure that you are connected to those who have the money and those who really have an interest in driving real action in Brazil quickly. So we hope that you will, think about applying to the lab, the Brazil lab. I'm again very excited that we have launched that, and I really hope that this will be one of the ways that can be used in order to support Brazil in getting towards its goals.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Barbara. And so what Barbara basically pointed to us is that there is a need for not only finance, but also good ideas and prototypes for making it happen. And I think Ms. Sennhauser can talk a little bit about the role of the World Bank on this, particularly because given the issue of land use, forest and agriculture, I think that when you look at the global scale, it is clear that Brazil, Indonesia, and some other countries will be the leading countries on this challenge. So one of the questions here for Ms. Sennhauser that I think we can explore in your talk is what do you think people expect from Brazil? and what you think Brazil can expect from the world.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you. I'm going to speak in English. I can speak a little bit of Portuguese, a lot of Portuñol, but I'm going to do it in English. Okay, there. Okay. Let me start by saying that it's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you. What the coalition is doing is a model of what should be happening in the world, bringing everyone together at the country level to make things happen, to have action on the ground. I think that Brazil has made an incredible commitment to balance its growth model with sustainability, both on the environment and the social side. And the world very much looks at Brazil to try to see how is Brazil doing it, how Brazil has done it, and how this can be replicated everywhere else in the world. Brazil has also made very, very good progress, incredibly good progress in voluntarily reducing the carbon dioxide emissions at the country level, even before the commitments were made. If I have it correctly, you know, in the last few years, you have reduced emissions from deforestation higher than 40%. The minister will know this more than me, but that's unprecedented in the world. That's really unprecedented. The way that the profile of emissions of Brazil has changed in the last year is very strong. And I don't know about any other country that has changed so much so fast. So there's a lot of recognition and congratulations for the progress that Brazil has made. Still, on the emissions pattern of Brazil, agriculture plays a big role. Okay, so the progress that we have made with deforestation now has to be translated into how to accompany other parts of the land use model, and particularly the agriculture side. And I really look forward to Brazil having a leadership role on that too, because the world is calling for a lot of innovation, a lot of models, and a lot of metrics on how this can be done on other sectors related to land use. That's where a lot of the changes still needed in the world. And Brazil should lead on that agenda, as you have led in many other areas. And I think that the new Brazilian Forest Code is a very good opportunity for Brazil to show how you can still complement patterns of forest management with patterns of land use and patterns of agriculture and food production. I also know that Brazil has one of the most exciting and courageous and ambitious NDCs that I have seen. And we all know that not because of the applause that Brazil has received when you presented your NDC, but also because we were accompanying Brazil in the process of preparing it, and we know how much you have all worked to have such an ambitious goal in front of you. Again, I think that the biggest, one of the more interesting challenges that you will have in moving forward with the NDC is how Brazil tackles the land use aspects of the NDC, and how you bring all your technology, all your innovation, and all your partnerships to make that work in the future. And I think that particularly one thing that I'm interested in seeing is how that intensification happens in pasture lands, because that's where production models in the world in Brazil are still below of what can be compared. I was reading the other day some statistics preparing to come in today, and I understand that the potential of Brazilian pasture lands is around 35% of what it can produce. And if that potential is risen to almost 50%, Brazil can produce all and can meet all the meat requirements, wood requirements that it needs until 2040 without expanding future land use. So that's a really nice area for Brazil to explore and to continue showing the leadership that you have. The other area that I think is interesting is try to see how to advance the support to the small farmers, so the small farmers can also be agents on climate change. You know, many people ask us in the World Bank, they think that, you know, because we are the World Bank, we have all the knowledge on financing in the world, but they ask us where the money is going to come to support climate change and agriculture. And one of the things that we always say is, while the money comes, there's a lot of the money that is already there. And if we can focus some of the public money that is already there on making the farmers also help on the climate change challenges that we have, we are going the long way. Now, the farmers are the healers of the climate of the future. They are sinking carbon when they plant food. So they not only feed the planet, but they also kill the emissions that others have done. Not many sectors can claim that, but the food industry can. And I very much, again, have a lot of hope and expectation that Brazil can take a leadership on showing not only how this is done, but how this can be measured and how the metrics can be put in this, or others can follow you. And you already have a lot of good areas where climate smart agriculture is happening in Brazil. Your ABC program, the Programa de Agricultura de Baixo Carbono that you have is a very prominent program in climate smart agriculture, one of the biggest one in the world, in fact. We talk about your program all over the world, and many are curious on what Brazil is doing. So expanding that to other areas too is something that is going to be very promising. Finally, what I think that Brazil experience demonstrates is that it's extremely complex to put together growth, climate sustainability, environmental and social sustainability. But Brazil has also shown that these challenges can all work together and the solutions can be met. So I think that we in the World Bank look forward to Brazil continuing taking a leadership role into moving forward with a low carbon growth model. And we are very excited to continue working with all of you on this. And my final word again is to congratulate the coalition, bringing together so many players and trying to share what everyone is doing and continue promoting the role that Brazil has played and will continue playing in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think a very important point you raised is the issue of not only new money, but aligning the existing money on the direction of decarbonizing land use approach. And I think that's a very important issue for us to consider, because that means that we should consider changing the business as usual model and engaging on a new thinking. Our next speaker representing the Secretariat is Ms. Simenova, and I just want to thank you once again, because I know that although this conference seemed to be going easy comparatively to other COPs, normally the Secretariat is absolutely unable to attend any side event because they work so hard to get things done. And if the conference ends tomorrow, which is looking good, right, for that, it means that it's a big honor for us to have Ms. Patricia Espinosa's office represented here by you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure for me to be today with you and to speak as part of this distinguished panel. I would like to address very briefly 3 issues. The first is about the role of agriculture, forestry, and other land use, which are known as with abbreviation land use sector in the context of the implementation of the Convention, the Kyoto Protocol. Then to provide some highlights from Secretariat perspective, how we see climate action by Brazil in the land sector, and then to conclude with addressing the issue of implementation of the Paris Agreement and how coalitions can play a critical role in achieving objectives of the agreement. First of all, let me emphasize that from the UNFC perspective, land use sector has a unique role to play in the implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement because of its huge mitigation potential, but also given that this is the sector which will be the most affected by climate change. It is very encouraging that now we have under the Paris Agreement an architecture which implies that each country will have to find its own way to address both emissions and adapt to climate change in the context of its national circumstances. And in the same time, as the previous speakers highlighted, also to find the best way to the synergies between achieving the climate objectives and sustainable development objectives. This holds true at the national level, but it's also very important at the international level, where parties have already outlined their action plans, which are also known as nationally determined contributions. In fulfilling these contributions, they also need to address sustainable development goals in a way that allows to to maximize the mutual supportiveness of the policies that are designed to move the implementation of these two important issues forward. Also, when we speak about the land sector, we always need to keep in mind that essentially this is the only sector that is explicitly addressing the climate in the Paris Agreement, and it has its own dedicated article. What this article says, essentially, it recognizes that what we are doing under the convention delivers results, and Brazil is probably one of the most prominent examples in this sense, and this is what I would like to highlight a little bit later. Before going specifically to Brazil, I would like also to highlight that many developing countries and many developed countries as well included the land use sector in their NDCs, recognizing again the importance of this sector. In the same time, one of the important issues, especially when we speak about the land sector in the context of developing countries, is the recognition that financial support, capacity building, and also technology transfer at scale are critically needed in order to achieve the objectives enshrined in the NDCs. Last but not least, complexity of this sector also required to address in a holistic way issues such as food security, poverty alleviation, and productivity. Some of the colleagues that I met outside this room mentioned that they saw my name for a long time in this process, and this gives me a privilege to have my own insights in what is going on in many different areas and many different ways, and also to share my view and my impression that about the constructive role that Brazil has played over all these years in both in multilateral process, but also leading by example in setting ambitious action in domestic context. In the lead up to the Paris Agreement, in showcasing the effort at domestic level, Brazil presented an impressive array of climate action, including action in agricultural sector, as highlighted in the Brazilian sectoral plan on agriculture and climate change. Arguably, however, one of the most prominent areas where everybody recognized Brazil leadership is RED+. And facts here speak for themselves, because Brazil was the first country to submit a reference level for technical assessment, RED+ results for biennial update report, a national strategy for RED+, and safeguard summary report on RED+ implementation. Because I'm coming from the Secretariat, for me it's very important to highlight that Brazil was also the first country to include information on its RED+ results in the Lima Information Hub on RED+. Many parties are following now, example by Brazil, assigning significant role of RED+ in the context of their NDCs. I would like also to highlight Brazil's effort in the context of the South-South cooperation, which provides an opportunity to scale up and multiply the successful example and best practices in this important area. On our view, Brazil's success in RED+ sends a very clear signal about two issues. The first is that this builds sense of confidence in generating financial flows on RED+ actions, and show how results which are based on the payment could be a valuable instrument in generating action on the ground at significant scale. And secondly, it also sends a signal that RED+ under the convention actually works and delivers. I would like to conclude by a few remarks on the Paris Agreement and implementation of Brazil's NDCs. And I share the views of the previous speaker that the pledge by Brazil under the Paris Agreement is very, very, very ambitious. And I just want to remind everybody that this is about 37% and 43% emission reduction in 2025 and 2030, respectively, compared to 2005 levels. When looking at the toolbox of Brazil, the continuous implementation of forest code appears as a premier tool in achieving these ambitious goals. And in this sense, it is important to think about the engagement of all stakeholders, including stakeholders which are now engaged in Brazilian coalition on climate, forest, and agriculture, in order to advance the implementation of the action on the ground, and which is an action which resonates very well with one of the important pillars of the Paris Agreement, which recognizes the important role of the non-party stakeholders in the implementation of climate policies. I'm very encouraged to see what is going on the ground, and looking forward for very interesting exchange and finding the best way to address challenges and use the opportunities stemming from Brazilian experience. Thank you.
Thank you. So from what I'm hearing on the table, it looks all good news. And there's money, there are ideas, piece of cake. And we know that that's not exactly how it happens when you try to make it happen on the ground. So I'm going to encourage now Minister Sarney and Minister Maggi to speak a little bit about, from the government perspective, of having to make that happen and having to not only fulfill the NDC commitment towards the international community, but also the commitment made for the people of Brazil. What are the priorities that the government will undertake, and not being able to do everything at the same time? If there is already an idea of where are the low-hanging fruits that the government have identified. And because Minister Sarney have an important meeting before the end of this event, he has asked me to first give him the opportunity to speak. And the director, Everton Lucero, will then replace him and continue with us on our panel. So please, Minister Sarney.
Obrigado. Quero dizer que o Everton Lucero, que vai me substituir, entende muito mais do assunto do que eu. Portanto, os senhores é que vão sair ganhando com a minha ausência aqui. Pois bem, eu acho, nós temos os compromissos voluntários que o Brasil assumiu. Nós vamos focar, pelo menos o que nós desejamos, na floresta, na agricultura e na energia. É lógico que a questão florestal ainda continua sendo o foco principal da nossa ação. O ministro da Agricultura vai poder se debruçar sobre a agricultura, então eu vou bem rapidamente, porque eu acho que vocês vão aprofundar muito mais a questão nas perguntas, falar sobre a questão florestal. Todos sabem que o Brasil conseguiu uma redução de 80% no desmatamento da Amazônia. Isso teve reflexo nas nossas emissões, que diminuíram, e hoje o desmatamento na Amazônia ele está sob controle, mas é evidente que nós queremos acabar com o desmatamento. Eu não gosto de usar essa palavra ilegal, eu acho que fica uma coisa difícil de compreensão para os senhores aqui que estão aqui, mas o desmatamento na Amazônia nós temos que zerar, e faz parte do nosso compromisso. Então, eu acredito que hoje nós já estamos num patamar em que esse desmatamento está sob controle, graças a ações de comando e controle, ou seja, ações de repressão, ações de polícia. Nós temos hoje alta tecnologia, uma tecnologia bastante avançada, talvez a mais avançada do mundo no que diz respeito ao monitoramento do desmatamento na Amazônia em tempo real, com um grau de precisão hoje o melhor do mundo. Então, isso nos dá uma ferramenta importante para a gente poder fiscalizar e balizar. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, hoje nós estamos numa situação em que só comando e controle não resolve mais a situação. Nós precisamos oferecer alternativas econômicas. Na Amazônia vivem mais de 25 milhões de pessoas hoje. E essas pessoas precisam viver, precisam ter qualidade de vida. E, infelizmente, é justamente na Amazônia que estão os municípios mais pobres do Brasil. Então, essa é uma questão que agora fica mais clara com a diminuição do desmatamento. Nós precisamos oferecer alternativas que valorizem o bem ambiental. E, se isso não for feito com alguma rapidez, todo esse trabalho pode ir por água abaixo, porque o que nós estamos sentindo nos últimos 2 anos é um pequeno aumento do desmatamento, que se deu, evidentemente, pelo afrouxamento da fiscalização, por motivos políticos e econômicos, que não cabe aqui a gente se aprofundar, mas o importante, no que diz respeito à Amazônia hoje, a conter o desmatamento, é oferecer alternativas econômicas para as populações, valorizar a floresta em pé. E, para isso, evidentemente, os mecanismos que estão sendo discutidos aqui, como Rede Mais, mecanismos de Bolsa Verde, fundo de compensações, tudo isso é muito importante e tudo isso tem que ser efetivado de uma maneira muito rápida. Eu acredito que no Brasil, é lógico, quando se fala em Brasil e desmatamento, a gente pensa só na Amazônia, mas nós temos outros biomas importantes que precisamos cuidar. Hoje nós temos o Cerrado, que é a nossa savana brasileira, que também está sob forte pressão. E nós precisamos agora colocar os olhos nisso. Ao lado também dessas questões florestais, nós temos que compatibilizar com o crescimento do país, com a agricultura. O Brasil é forte na agricultura, o Brasil é líder também na agricultura, e nós temos que compatibilizar, e esse processo, graças a Deus, nós estamos começando a acertar. O ministro da Agricultura, que está aqui ao meu lado, que veio comigo juntos, fizemos ações juntas, tivemos várias reuniões no Brasil, estamos tendo ao longo desse tempo. Hoje eu diria que nós estamos muito afinados nessa questão. E, evidentemente, que dá para compatibilizar o crescimento da agricultura com a manutenção dos nossos ecossistemas para que eles continuem prestando os serviços ambientais tão necessários no mundo com estresse climático ambiental. Então, acredito que a saída para nós continuarmos essa política de redução das nossas emissões por desmatamento, por contenção do desmatamento, ela passa necessariamente pela questão financeira. Pela questão financeira, passa necessariamente pelas parcerias, e é importante que, num momento como esse, a gente possa cada vez mais aprofundar a discussão de como essa parceria pode ser feita. Quero dizer que a coalizão ela tem prestado uma grande ajuda, é parceira do Ministério do Meio Ambiente, é parceira do Ministério da Agricultura, é parceira do governo brasileiro, e eu acho que ações assim como essa nos ajudam a encontrar esse caminho. Então, basicamente, o que eu queria deixar aqui para vocês como mensagem é essa: nós não podemos pensar na floresta dissociada dos homens, das pessoas. E para que a gente possa pensar nisso, a gente tem que valorizar o bem ambiental, dar a ele um valor econômico de tal forma que possa diminuir as dificuldades, combater a pobreza e melhorar a qualidade de vida das pessoas. Era isso, basicamente, que queria dizer nesse primeiro momento.
Thank you, Minister Sarney. You've heard a couple of times about the Brazilian Coalition on Climate, Forest, and Agriculture. So just before giving the word to Minister Maggi, I just want to make a quick remark. It is a coalition with now over 150 members. The membership involves civil society, academia, and the private sector. And we're divided in working groups. So we have bioenergy as one of the working groups. The forest code, which is another working group, was mentioned here as a very important piece to make land use in Brazil move forward. Low carbon agriculture, that was also mentioned. I think I've heard that World Bank said that we need to put more money on low carbon agriculture, but maybe it was a translation. Restoration and reforestation, I think it's an extremely important one because we're talking about land conversion here and the opportunity we have to transform degraded land in a climate asset. Tropical forest economy, which is about using the forest sustainably. Valuation and ecosystem services, that was mentioned here by Minister Sarney and by many of the speakers here, is an incredible opportunity for us to capitalize and bring resources while providing climate action. And finally, international cooperation. Those are the working groups that the coalition is divided. In all working groups, we have a balance of representation from different sectors. In many of them, we have the leadership divided by a organization from civil society and an organization by the private sector. And that means it's a lot of work to get results because we have very heated debates. And when the debates become something that we all agree, that becomes a position that the coalition promotes. When we don't manage to come to that conclusion, we identify where are the agreements, but we also identify where are the disagreements. And this is very important because in general, the list of agreements is always bigger than the list of disagreements. And eventually what we find is that with a little bit of time, more information, more understanding, more trust, and willingness to leave your zone of comfort, you can build consensus. And I think that's a very important word that we're using in the coalition because the comfortable zone is that you just stay where you always have been and you say the other one has to change. In the coalition, what we're promoting is the idea that everybody has to change if we're serious about making this challenge happen, if we're serious about really addressing the challenge of the future generations that deserve the right to live in this planet. So with that, I would now ask, please, Minister Blairo Maggi, to give us from the Minister of Agriculture perspective, what are the key opportunities and challenges you see on the homework that we need to do on land use?
Obrigado, Marcelo. Cumprimento os demais componentes da nossa mesa. Dizer que valeu a pena ter vindo a Marrakech só pelo que eu vi agora à tarde aqui nessa mesa. É muito importante que haja um reconhecimento dos avanços que o Brasil fez até agora. O Brasil avançou muito mais que outros países avançaram. Aliás, se os outros países que fazem agricultura, e falando aqui do lado da agricultura, da pecuária, se fizessem o mesmo trabalho, a mesma dedicação, a mesma legislação, as mesmas exigências que tem no Brasil, certamente a coisa estaria de forma diferente e nós poderíamos estar falando já em outros patamares. Então, o reconhecimento de que eu vi hoje aqui é muito importante para que eu possa dizer para os produtores agrícolas brasileiros o que eles sempre gostariam de ter ouvido, ou há muito tempo gostariam de ter ouvido, de que o sacrifício deles, o custo que eles tiveram, o custo que nós tivemos, é importante para a estabilização do clima e que sirva de modelo, ou serve de modelo para muitos outros países. Então, esse eu acho que é o ponto de partida para um novo paradigma, para uma nova situação que nós devemos enfrentar. É de conhecimento de todos que o Brasil tem, na agricultura, uma das suas principais atividades econômicas. Pela crise econômica que nós vivemos, 50% de tudo que o Brasil tem exportado nesse último ano tem vindo da agricultura e da pecuária. Então, se vocês sentirem o quanto é importante essa atividade para o Brasil. E na agricultura, para semear e plantar, o Estado brasileiro usa apenas 8% do seu território. É uma parte pequena de um território gigante como é. E que usamos 19,7% para atividades de pecuária. 61% do território brasileiro ainda é preservado da forma original de 1500, quando os portugueses chegaram no Brasil. Então, o Brasil tem um ativo grande, importante na mão e que não é monetizado. Nós não conseguimos receber nada por isso até então. e os custos sobre o setor produtivo brasileiro e sobre a sociedade brasileira para fazer essa preservação é muito grande. Vocês imaginam os milhares e milhares de hectares, os 11% de preservação ambiental que o Brasil tem, que são feitos dentro das propriedades rurais brasileiras pelos custos e pelas contas dos produtores, sem ter nada em troca de forma financeira. Então, dito isso, o Brasil agradece o reconhecimento que está sendo feito hoje aqui e se propõe, nos NDCs que foram colocados, a avançar. Porém, eu posso dizer com toda tranquilidade, já disse isso em outras reuniões que nós fizemos, nós não temos condições financeiras, monetárias, de levar adiante a intenção que o Brasil colocou. Eu gosto dessa frase, intenção, dessa palavra intenção. O que é a intenção que o Brasil assumiu perante ao mundo não pode ser obrigação do produtor brasileiro. Tem que ser a intenção do produtor brasileiro também. E tenho certeza que nós não vamos nos furtar de ajudar a fazer. Mas precisamos de financiamentos, precisamos de oportunidade para que os produtores possam fazer. Muitos ainda no Brasil acham que produtores de pecuária, produtores agrícolas, são muito ricos, que ganham muito dinheiro. Ganhamos dinheiro, mas não somos muito ricos. Os pecuaristas, por exemplo, eles têm, se formos olhar como na escala, como se faz a questão econômica, eles seriam de classe média para baixo. Quer dizer, precisam da sua atividade no dia a dia para manter as suas propriedades, manter seus filhos na escola, conseguir ter uma vida digna. Então, ele não tem capacidade de ir a um banco, tomar financiamentos e chegarmos ao ponto de recuperarmos 15 milhões de hectares de pastagem que foram colocadas como intenção que o Brasil tem. Eu digo com toda tranquilidade, não tem condições para isso. Então, precisamos achar mecanismos para isso. Financiamentos, conversão de boa parte dessa área de pecuária para a agricultura. A agricultura consegue pagar essa conta, a pecuária não consegue. Então, ao longo do tempo, nós temos que ir criando esses mecanismos, criar fundos. Ontem eu conversei ainda com um grupo de pessoas, a intenção de criar um fundo de aval para mitigar os custos do produtor e melhorar o recebimento ou diminuir o risco que os bancos têm em emprestar o dinheiro para os produtores, para eles fazerem essa recuperação de pastagens que tem. A grosso modo, em uma conta muito rápida, nós precisaríamos aí mais de 40, 50 bilhões de dólares só para cumprir minimamente essas questões que foram aí colocadas. Então, é muito dinheiro, as nossas contas elas não fecham, né? Nós não temos condições de levar isso adiante, mas diria o seguinte, é intenção do Brasil cumprir isso com o mundo, como foi colocado? Sim. Nós podemos fazer com que os produtores brasileiros se engajem nisso? Sim. Ao voltar, eu quero pedir à Embrapa, e a Embrapa, está aqui o presidente da Embrapa, o doutor Maurício Lopes, a Embrapa tem um centro de monitoramento de imagens de satélites muito bom mesmo, que tudo que você pedir lá para o doutor Evaristo, em pouco tempo ele consegue separar para você o que é assentamento, o que é agricultura, o que é isso, o que é aquilo. Muito bem. Eu acho que nós podemos levar adiante uma ideia de conversar com os produtores brasileiros, tanto agrícolas quanto de pecuária, e dentro de cada uma dessas propriedades, e na minha não é diferente, eu também tenho, dentro de cada uma dessas propriedades nós temos terras marginais, nós temos terras que não são boas nem para a pecuária e não são boas nem para a agricultura. E, no entanto, nós abrimos essas áreas há anos atrás, elas estão lá, até no custo, no balanço das fazendas, elas são negativas, elas puxam as médias para baixo. Então, talvez num programa muito mais barato do que você tirar uma terra de boa qualidade ou reflorestar alguma coisa que você não queira, de que esses proprietários, voluntariamente, mas com ajuda financeira, possam oferecer essas áreas para que nós possamos fazer, e eu diria assim, não só o reflorestamento, ou melhor dizer, não o reflorestamento, porque ele custa muito caro, mas sim fecharmos essas áreas para que eles possam se regenerar pela própria natureza. Eu tive uma experiência durante o Código Florestal, e eu vou pedir mais um minutinho, eu nasci numa cidade, lá em São Miguel do Iguaçu, no Paraná, onde tinha um distrito de São Miguel do Iguaçu dentro do Parque Nacional. E essas pessoas foram retiradas há mais de 40 anos lá de dentro do parque, e era uma cidade. Foram retiradas e foi deixado com que a natureza voltasse sozinha lá. E eu, no plano, durante o Código Florestal, eu fui com uma equipe visitar esse local. Impressionante, impressionante. Você só acha que é a cidade porque algumas construções não foram derrubadas e você consegue identificar lá, então, e você vê as árvores que nasceram por fora das casas, entraram dentro da casa, ou vice-versa. Quer dizer, a natureza, e a Mata Atlântica, ela se regenerou completamente em 40 anos. Então, quando nós falamos de 40 anos para a minha vida, é muito. Né? Eu já tenho 60, mas 40 já foi. Mas para a natureza, né, 40 anos não é absolutamente nada, é tudo muito rápido. Nós mesmo estamos falando em estabilização do clima para mais 30 ou 40 anos para frente. Então, nessa abordagem, e aqui não quero tirar aqui a dedicação de ninguém que quer fazer plantio de árvore. Acho extremamente válido, mas extremamente caro. Se temos financiamento para fazer reflorestamento, como a SOS Atlântica faz, que tem lá 60, 70 espécies dentro de um único hectare que está fazendo reflorestamento, ótimo, maravilhoso, mas não dá para fazer para todo o Brasil. Então, naqueles espaços que dá para fazer uma recuperação total, regeneração total, ok, vamos fazer. Mas aonde não dá, nós temos que propor uma coisa mais leve, uma coisa mais factível para os produtores brasileiros, tanto de pecuária quanto de agricultura. Também nós vamos nos esforçar muito através da Embrapa, através do nosso centro de pesquisa, nas pesquisas que estão sendo feitas, já com alguns sinais positivos de uso de bactérias para fixação de nitrogênio nas gramíneas. Como hoje nós temos da soja, 100% da soja não usa nitrogênio. Aliás, é uma coisa em que, inclusive, eu recebi uma denúncia há poucos dias atrás, que algumas cooperativas do Paraná estão forçando os produtores rurais a comprar fórmulas de adubo para a soja com nitrogênio. Isso não precisa ser feito, uma coisa que nós vamos averiguar. O mercado é livre, mas não precisa, é contra o próprio meio ambiente isso. E no futuro, então, se nós pudermos levar com que haja uma diminuição de 30%, ou de 40%, até de 50% da aplicação de nitrogênio nas gramíneas por uso de bactérias para fixar nitrogênio, seria um grande avanço, é um grande avanço para a agricultura do mundo e a agricultura brasileira. Então, nós teríamos muitas coisas para mostrar. Acho que o Brasil tem já outras coisas feitas que não foram trazidas para a mesa ainda, viu, Marcelo? Não foram trazidas para a mesa. Por exemplo, o Brasil é líder mundial no recolhimento de embalagens de agrotóxicos. O balanço é zero. Tudo que nós levamos para o campo, 97%, o que nós levamos para o campo, nós trazemos de volta. Quando eu olho os números da França, olho os números de outros países, é incrivelmente menor. Incrivelmente menor. Então, eu vou apresentar, dentro de pouco tempo, pelo Ministério da Agricultura, todas as somatórias de outras atividades que nós estamos fazendo na agricultura brasileira e que não foram colocadas ainda como crédito para nós, e nós acho que os merecemos. Eu quero mais uma vez aqui, ao finalizar, agradecer aqui as palavras de reconhecimento por aquilo que o Brasil tem feito, pelo aquilo que os agricultores brasileiros têm feito, e pode ter certeza, a partir de uma declaração dessa, onde nós somos reconhecidos pelo que fizemos, nós podemos avançar muito mais. Obrigado.
Obrigado, ministro. So I first want to introduce to you Luana. She's the executive secretary for the coalition. She will be taking notes of people that would like to make questions. So we can put, and maybe you want to stand up there, Luana, so you can see everybody. The first question that I want to put on the table here, I'm going to take a lead from what Minister Blairo said, because for most people in this convention, the NDC is a commitment that every country took on their national level. And so there's a strong understanding that it is a commitment. And the minister was saying that Brazil will be unable to do that commitment without help, without technology, without assistance. And I think partially for the coalition, that's part of the reason why we exist. If you look at the working groups I mentioned, the ecosystem services, the restoration, these are all working groups designed to make this NDC happen. That's our commitment. And so what I would put for the table is, if our idea is to change our Minister Blairo's mindset that next time he comes here, he will say the NDC that we have is actually not good enough. We have to go further. We can do more. What do you think the world, and from your perspective, from where you're seeing it, can do to help countries to achieve that objective, given the challenges that both Ministers Sarney and Blairo outlined? Do you want to start, Barbara?
That was an easy question. No, well, first of all, I want to thank, I think all the panelists, ministers for the reflections here. I certainly learned a lot, and I do want to, emphasize also, all the successes and all the actions, activities that Brazil has met. But I think we really need to understand what are the priorities now in order to get started on moving us towards this pathway to implementing the NDCs, but also going beyond. I mean, if you look at the NDCs, from a global perspective, the NDCs that have been submitted, we do know that they don't get us yet on a below 2 degrees pathway. So I think I agree with you, Marcelo, and I think the work you're doing in the coalition is extremely important and showcasing more that can be done in order to really helping us to get on the right pathway there. I do think Brazil has a really important role to, be the leader and showcasing, based on what we've heard here from the various panelists on all the, recognized facts and that the real action that has been going on. But I think it also has a responsibility, but which at the same time is an opportunity, I do think, to really show how you can go beyond. So really be active, be innovative, think about ways in which you can really make progress along the different kind of priority areas of the NDC. So I'd like actually to put back a question and really understand what are the priorities in the near future to make sure that this pathway started quickly, because I think we are running out of time if we really want to get started and make sure that we are actually getting on this low carbon climate resilient pathway. I just want to make one comment also based on the comments from the ministers here. Completely agree that in order to get Brazil's NDC implemented, you do need financing, you need opportunities, new financial modes. And I want to come back again to the lab. I think this will be one of the ways to showcase what could be specific financial modes that can help to implement the NDC. So we will be looking to you, Marcelo, but also to the ministers, and really understanding what are the areas where you see action can happen faster, where you basically need more commitment from other stakeholders, other financiers that are not yet involved, and where the lab could play a role in helping link your coalition and link the work that is ongoing in Brazil already with a broader set of actors coming both from the public and the private sphere. So I think I'll stop here.
Thank you. And just to remind, what we do is this quick reactions. There's a question, Minister Blairo, on priorities for Everton and for you. And then we go for questions from the audience, and I'm already compiling a list, okay?
Marcelo, me permite complementar o que a doutora Bárbara colocou? Acho que a doutora Bárbara colocou o seguinte, que o que nós temos que fazer, quais são as propostas, quais são os caminhos, aonde que a gente pode estimular para cumprir esses M16, chegar mais à frente. Eu diria o seguinte, nós temos um problema grave de mercado mundial de alimentos. Protecionismo para tudo quanto é lado. A gente não consegue avançar, não consegue vender para determinado país, porque lá ele tem uma proteção, ele prefere comprar de alguém que tenha mais amizade e coisa parecida. Eu acho que uma coisa que se poderia colocar nessas discussões é os países que conseguirem fazer uma agricultura de mais baixo carbono comprovadamente, eles teriam direito de ir a alguns mercados que eles são fechados. A gente estimularia muito o agricultor brasileiro, os agricultores de outros países, a baixarem seus níveis de carbono para poder vender, por exemplo, vender suínos para a Alemanha. Né? Agora estou vendendo carne para os Estados Unidos, mas até então não podia. Eu não posso entrar com suínos na Europa. Tem uma série de restrições que, se colocado na contabilidade de carbono, vai fazer com que países possam acelerar esse processo para poder atingir mercado. Seria uma forma de remuneração indireta desse serviço ambiental.
Everton, já que o ministro respondeu diretamente, você gostaria de responder a pergunta da Bárbara sobre as prioridades?
Obrigado, Marcelo. I'll speak in English so that it's easier. we are at the moment precisely in the process of starting the elaboration of a national strategy to implement and finance the NDC. So financing is our focus, and we welcome very much your ideas, your suggestions, and your support in helping us designing the right models and the financing tools that would be appropriate for our case. We understand very clearly that the ambitious NDC that we put forward will require support that we cannot expect will come only from the public sector. We do need to harness the potential of private investments from everywhere. And if for all those that are able to contribute to that, we more than welcome. But as for the priorities, we are working based on our profile emissions. That is, as Minister Sarney Filho said in his initial remarks, energy, agriculture, and forests or land use change. And based on what is already in our NDC, now the next step that we intend to include in our national strategy is precisely to detail what are these instruments. We are now collecting inputs, and we intend to do that together with all the interested parties, with the private sector, with the civil society, NGOs, in a national debate throughout the 6 months in 2017 until June, first semester, first half of 2017, to engage in discussions, to compile all the ideas so that our national strategy will reflect the needs and will be catered for the specific sectors that we intend to address to implement the NDC. So it is an ongoing work, and we've just started.
Obrigado. So just reminding time, I'm going to ask for short responses so we can get questions here from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really like what the minister said, that when we are recognized what we are doing, then we can do much more. I think this is the key message that I bring from this meeting. And I would like to share with you that this is exactly what the Paris Agreement is about, to provide an opportunity within the context of the UNFCCC process to showcase the success stories, then to go one step further, to certify at the UN level using most advanced scientific methodologies what was achieved, and then based on this achievement to provide a lot of room and opportunity for innovative financing. And one of the new tools that emerged in the recent years is the Green Climate Fund, and I'm very happy to share with you that recently Green Climate Fund is looking very carefully at further options and opportunities for REDD+ financing. Thank you.
Ms. Sennhauser, just because there's an issue of a question on trade and the NDCs, if you can explore a little bit that as well.
That's okay. That's the most, I was going to pass that to you. But I just want to compliment before what the minister was saying, and you were asking us, what else do we need to do to be able to help farmers like the Brazilian farmers on moving towards making climate change and production more aligned. And I, you know, the minister, you were talking a lot about farmers making sacrifices, you know, and the ideal situation is for farmers not having to do that. Now we more and more are starting to find that innovation and science are discovering all these triple wins, where farmers can increase their productivity while at the same time work on resilience and work on mitigation. And those triple wins exist in many of the production systems that we have today. They exist on rice, they exist on agroforestry, they exist on many crops and many staples, and they're being streamlined in many places, including Brazil. Scaling those up as much as possible and as far as possible makes everyone part of that solution. So we don't need to make the farmers keep on being the burdeners of having a climate, a production system that 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 is not consistent with climate emissions, and we need to work more on that. Of course, we need more innovation in this in the sector, and that's one of the biggest problems that I think we have in agriculture. You know, we don't have the electric car, we don't have the wind turbine as other sectors have. In a way, you know, we keep on doing agriculture in the same way we did it 100 years ago, same fertilizers, same technologies. We are moving a little bit, but we haven't had the bigger revolution in agriculture yet. And there are many researchers in the world that are working on that. Embrapa is a big contribution to the knowledge in the world, the CGIAR Center too, but we need to work much more to keep on discovering those elements of innovation that that will make the farmers continue adopting climate smart technologies and triple wins moving forward. So let me stop there.
Thank you. So I just want to make an announcement that Ms. Kacha will have to leave because the COP is back on action there. So we're very happy that you're going, to be honest, because we want this COP to end well. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much. So we have right now a list of people, and I'm going to entertain 3 questions at a time. So we'll get the 3 people that will make questions, and then the next round of 3 questions, okay? I'll just wait the minister because we want him to listen to the question. If you do the question in English, I'll do the translation here for him. Oh, no, there is translation there. Excellent. So just maybe a microphone for the question, right? Okay, so I'll read the names of who will be the first 3 questions. It will be Alfredo Sirquis from the Brazilian Forum of Climate Change, Deputado Bussi, and Carlos Richo from Observatório do Clima. Those are the first 3 questions. Sirquis, your question. Maybe you say in the podium and people can hear. It's just questions, Sirquis. Don't get excited.
Provocation, maybe. Well, contrary to other countries, the Brazilian INDC is unconditional. But of course, we can use and we deserve and we need a lot of finance. We've been discussing a lot of possibilities, and the one that's in an immediate discussion in Brazil at this time is the question of a guarantees fund. Because as you know, our interest rates are terribly high, world rates are low. Yesterday I heard in the same room that 20% of financial investments on negative interest rates. So we need to bring this money into our country. So the question of the provocation to the World Bank, how can you help us build a solid guarantees fund for that?
Thank you, Sirquis. Deputado.
Well, first of all, I would like to highlight the presence of 2 important ministers in Brazilian government, working together in Brazilian government and also in this COP. I think that is the real politics that we need in our times, because the agriculture isn't an enemy of the environment, but one of the answers of that. One important point highlighted in this COP and now was the financial aspect. I see that when you have a good idea, a good and a useful idea, the money follow it. For good ideas, however, we need 2 special things. First, we need institutional stability. Nobody thinks well in a war, for example. The second aspect is an environment of technological innovation. What do you think about this? Wouldn't be the most important public policy, institutional stability, and environment of innovation? Embrapa in Brazil is a good example in which institutional aspect and innovation one are bring together. I'd like to listen you about you. Thank you.
Obrigado, deputado. Carlos Rito, please.
Vou fazer em português. Sou Carlos Rito, secretário executivo do Observatório do Clima. Mais uma, talvez minha colocação aqui é para colocar em perspectiva um pouco do que vem sendo dito ao longo desses dias a respeito da agricultura e pecuária brasileira, na ótica do Observatório do Clima. Tem uma carta aqui assinada por mim, por André Ferretti, que é coordenador do Observatório do Clima, tentando colocar em perspectiva algumas das afirmações que a gente ouviu ao longo desses dias. O Brasil vem aqui, muito importante falar sobre o papel que tem no combate às mudanças climáticas, no enfrentamento das mudanças climáticas, mostrar o seu progresso, mas eu acho que a gente ainda tem muito a avançar. E nos preocupa um pouco quando a gente vem falar que nós já somos sustentáveis, quando a gente tem muito, apesar do progresso, a gente tem muito a progredir. Foi dito que, entre outros, que a nossa agricultura já é sustentável, quando, de fato, a gente tem um desafio enorme, inclusive a nossa própria NDC, ela prevê a eliminação do desmatamento ilegal somente em 2030, o que demonstra que a gente tem muito a avançar. Foi dito que os números de mortes de ambientalistas no Brasil, de fato, eles são questionáveis. Quando a organização que produziu esses números, ela tem mais de 20 anos de atuação, e 1/3 das mortes de ambientalistas no mundo inteiro, no ano passado, ocorreram no Brasil. Foi dito também que há custos para o agricultor para o enfrentamento das mudanças climáticas e para a mitigação. Nós entendemos que estes custos eles têm que ser também colocados em perspectivas em relação aos custos que nós temos com o desmatamento. Esse ano, no ano passado, nós tivemos mais de 6.200 km² de desmatamento na Amazônia. Esse ano, muito possivelmente, algo em torno de 7.000 km². Se a gente fosse associar um valor por tonelada de carbono, a gente chegaria a custos muito similares ou maiores ainda para a sociedade brasileira. E se a gente levar em consideração a securitização da dívida, a rolagem de dívida dos agricultores a cada ano, o custo de implementação nos chegaria a 10 bilhões de reais nos próximos 13 anos até 2030. Ou seja, algo parecido com aquilo que foi colocado dos 40 bilhões de reais, ou seja, a gente já investe. E, por último, sobre o papel da agricultura e pecuária brasileira no enfrentamento das mudanças climáticas, nós podemos ter uma atividade que não só reduz emissões, mas como sequestra carbono da atmosfera, mas ainda nós emitimos. Nossos dados, que são produzidos anualmente, mostram que a agricultura e pecuária brasileira é responsável por 69% das emissões brutas brasileiras. Se a gente tiver uma agricultura de fato sustentável, com 100% do crédito agrícola para agricultura e pecuária de baixo carbono, eu tenho certeza que o setor produtivo é a favor disso também, nós poderíamos chegar a um balanço negativo de emissões. Produzir alimentos, atender nossas demandas internas e externas, de maneira a contribuir não apenas para uma agricultura mais competitiva, sustentável, mas também para o enfrentamento das mudanças climáticas. Vou fazer só a entrega para o senhor ministro e para o ministro Everton como secretário, mas encerro aqui as minhas colocações e muito obrigado.
Obrigado, Carlos. Consciente do tempo, eu vou fazer um pedido aqui para o painel, porque nós temos mais 4 inscritos e eu acho que se a gente fizer a rodada de resposta, depois pegar mais as 4 perguntas, a gente talvez não tenha tempo. Então, eu pergunto para os panelistas se eu posso coletar mais 4 perguntas, porque como vai dividir, e vocês se esforçam em fazer, e a gente já faz as últimas colocações nas respostas. Tudo bem? Tudo bem, ministro? Fazer assim? Tudo bem. Tá bom. Então, agora o próximo bloco eu tenho o Paulo Adário, Plínio, a Beth Farina, e desculpa, eu não tenho o seu nome, está escrito cabelo grande na primeira fila. Qual é o seu nome? Matias. Tá bom? Então, esses são os 4 que vão fazer pergunta agora. Por favor, Beth, pode começar, aí o microfone vai para o Plínio. Paulo, onde você está? Está aqui.
Elizabeth Farina, I am the president of the sugarcane industry in Brazil. First of all, I joined the minister saying that it's very good to hear something positive from Brazil. In the last months, we have faced a lot of difficulties, and so it's very good to hear. Also, it's good to hear that there is plenty of money available to finance green investments. But in the other side, in order to really have investment, you have to have return. So you have to have financing availability and also demand for these funds. And this returns us to discussion on trade, because in order to have a better return, you need to have the recognition and valuation of markets of green products. Whatever this can be, you can define, but we know a low carbon activities. So this has to be valued by the market. I would like to understand how World Bank, how CPI could help in this regard related to the valuation, and in order to include in trade, international trade, this recognition. I just add to what the minister mentioned, that if we have to accomplish the Brazilian NDC related to biofuels, we have also to invest $40 billion.
And just conscious of time, I'm going to ask the ones making questions if you can be very concise, otherwise we won't be able to respect, and there's another session after this one.
Ok, vou fazer em português para ir mais rápido também. Para os dois, mas principalmente para o ministro da Agricultura. O senhor já deve ter percebido que a implementação do Código Florestal é a peça mais importante da nossa NDC. Então, duas perguntas rápidas. Uma coisa que preocupa muito são as ADINs que estão atualmente no Supremo Tribunal Federal, que causam extrema insegurança para quem está envolvido na implementação do Código. Qual a opinião do senhor, qual o papel do Ministério para resolver esse assunto e acabar com essa insegurança jurídica? Eu ia fazer duas, mas vou parar uma aqui por respeito ao tempo.
Agradeço. Paulo.
Alô. Vou fazer a minha... Sorry, I will speak in Portuguese, and I hope the translation will help me to be faster. Como brasileiro, eu também fico muito feliz de ouvir tantos elogios ao Brasil pelo esforço enorme de ter derrubado o desmatamento. E fico feliz que o mundo tenha reconhecido isso, não é de hoje, não é dessa reunião, e essa não é a primeira vez que eu ouço, porque isso aumenta a responsabilidade do Brasil num momento em que você tem o efeito Trump ameaçando essa convenção. O papel do Brasil é fundamental e, como brasileiro, eu gostaria de lembrar às autoridades do meu país que esse papel não é uma intenção. Os compromissos assumidos pelo Brasil junto à Convenção de Clima não são uma intenção. Eles são uma obrigação. É um compromisso assumido que não pode voltar atrás. Pode ser mais ambicioso na revisão das NDCs, como, por exemplo, o Brasil pode abandonar essa bobagem do desmatamento legal zero e assumir o desmatamento zero. Mas o Brasil pode ser mais ambicioso e essa ambição é que o mundo espera do Brasil. Nesse momento, eu queria, inclusive, perguntar para a Miss Ethel, Sennhauser, do Banco Mundial, há um problema que está acontecendo no Brasil. Apesar das boas notícias, o desmatamento voltou a subir. E as emissões brasileiras do setor de energia estão subindo também aceleradamente. Então, esse cenário positivo pode afetar seriamente a performance e a credibilidade do Brasil como esse player internacional que pode assumir uma liderança. A minha pergunta para a senhora é, basicamente, o que a senhora espera que o Brasil possa fazer ou deva fazer para manter e assumir e ampliar a posição de liderança que ele ocupa agora? Obrigado.
Obrigado. Paulo, por favor.
Okay, sorry if you asked something I like, but
This is the final question, and then we go for answers.
Yeah, so I'm Matías Opaso. I come from Uppsala University, and my question is for the minister and for Mrs. Sennhauser. Well, I really appreciate the commitment of Brazil tackling climate change, and I also agree and see the need for financial mechanisms. But I'm concerned given the unstable political scenario of Brazil, and mainly because of the big corruption problems. So I was wondering how Brazil will address the corruption and prove itself truthful. And by the other hand, Mrs. Sennhauser, I was wondering what mechanisms has the World Bank to assure the resources are used properly. And well, this is particularly important because the Paris Agreement was agreed based mainly on the SDGs, which consider also inequality, dignity, and stuff like that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let me start. Should I?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me start by saying that when I travel around the world looks at Brazil. So if I am sending a positive message, it's because that's what I hear. Okay. And it's not just in Latin America. I go from the most remote island in the Pacific to the Andes. Okay. And I had the luxury to travel in Brazil. I'm from Argentina, so I know a little bit your country. I've been in many of the places, in the Amazon, in Mato Grosso, in La Mata Atlantica, everywhere. And the world is curious. They always ask me, what's the recipe for Brazil? How has Brazil done it? You know, from the 70s, when you were a big food importer, to where you are today, one of the biggest food exporters in the world. What has Brazil done to make this revolution in a couple of decades? And you know that better than me. But the world has a lot of expectations on Brazil, and the world sees you as leading in innovation, as leading in agriculture, as leading in food production, and as leading in inclusiveness and sustainably. Okay, they know that you struggle from the environment and the social point of view. The news are all over the world, but overall, people look at Brazil to know what you are doing. And I think that people are still looking at Brazil on the challenge that you have today in front of you, and how are you going to go ahead with it? Okay, precisely because of the progress you have made. I am not sure about how deforestation is going in Brazil or how the emissions are going. I don't have the data. But overall, the story is a positive story, okay, compared to where the rest of the world is. So, you know, you can go 2 steps ahead, 1 step behind. But the story is a positive story. And you have reduced a lot the implications on deforestation. With the rest of the rest of the world, this is challenging. When I go to Central Africa, when I travel in Angola, when I travel in East Asia, they are where you were in the 60s or the 70s. Okay, and you have much beyond that. So you have done it, and you might struggle, you might think that you're not, but there's a lot of things that you have done. To me, the challenge that you have in front of you now is to see how you're going to tackle with making the productive sector, the land use sector, and agriculture being part of that trade-off with climate. Okay, because you know your figures better than me, but when you look at your composition of your emissions, all the progress that you have made in reduction of emissions from deforestation has not been comparable to how you have reduced emissions from agriculture. And I know that that's a challenge for Brazil, but I know that you are working on that. So how much you work on moving forward with that is going to be in the eyes of the rest of the world, and we'd like to look at you and see how you are moving forward as a leader on that too. So I am convinced that you can do it. Look, if Brazil cannot do it, many few countries in the world will be able to do it. Okay, there are models there. You have in the European Union today many countries that are trying to make an agriculture that is very climate friendly. The Irelands of this world, there are many, many countries that are trying to put everything together. And some of the programs that you have are working on that too. The financing is a big issue for us, and our colleagues in CPI know the numbers better than I. But from all the climate financing in the world, very little is going to agriculture. Okay? And that's a problem that we have to tackle all together. And why it's going very little on agriculture? I think because of 2 reasons. First, because we are not making the case on how important agriculture is in climate change and how important it's going to be. If we don't do anything on reducing emissions in agriculture, we are going to be the biggest problem in the world in climate change in 2050. The world is going to look at our sector and it's going to say, you're responsible today for 70% of the emissions of this planet because you haven't done anything and all the other sectors have reduced emissions. We cannot let the world say that to us. We have to act before, okay? And the second thing that we have to do is to show that we can do it, that we can reduce our emissions and we can heal the planet. The problem we have with the trade and all that is the metrics are very complicated. Okay, we cannot measure in the same way as others can measure it. So before we go into trade and how we are going to sell, climate-friendly agriculture, we have to be able to show to the world that what we're really doing is low carbon. And it's very difficult in agriculture because what 1 hectare does is not what another hectare does, even if we are producing the same crop. And you know that better than me. So you need, with all the science, all the data, all the human capacity Brazil has, you need to embrace that challenge. And you need to put forward solutions for the rest of the world to do it. That's my dream from Brazil. That's what I see you leading the pack. When agriculture has to make a difference in climate change, it has to come on the development, on the emerging economies and on the rest of the world from Brazil, together with others that are leading this. I'm sure you can do it. It is a challenge, but you have had challenges worse than this before. So with all the capacity, all the manpower you have, even if you're in the middle of a difficult fiscal situation, you can still work on this. So
thank you.
Works.
So as I'm sorry, but on my role of facilitator, and because there's another event in this room, I'm going to ask the responses to be a little bit shorter so both ministries can respond to the questions. We started a little bit later because the previous event also delayed a little bit, but in respect to the next event, we're going to try to do it in time. So I'm going to pass the microphone, and we won't be able to take more questions, but you can ask the minister on his way out for sure. He'll spare a few minutes outside the door, I hope.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And this was very inspiring. So I think, I can build on lots. What I wanted to say has already been said, which is fantastic. But I do want to come to the 2 questions here and just build on what we heard from Ethel just now. And I do think also the reason why we decided, why we were lucky to launch a Brazil lab is because we know all the human capacity, all the ideas, all the innovations that come out from Brazil. And the lab is actually supposed to be vetted by the market. So we bring together civil society for the ideas, we bring together different financiers, and that is the way to also come up then by looking, how we develop projects to start like measuring the impact, coming, to the very important topic of metrics. So that is, the lab really is supposed to do that and help, come up with solutions that are vetted by the market. And I just want to add to the other question on, whether the institutional stability and the environment of innovation is important. And I think what I see is, business as usual is not an option anymore. We do know we need to, move faster. Brazil will need to lead the way as it has done, in the past. But, the issue is that the money is out there. There's not a problem that there is a shortage of money. What is needed is to come up with solutions that balance the risks and the rewards and really come up with ways that are scalable and can, access different types, align different types of capital in order to really scale up. And I do think exactly that there's 2 factors in that context. One, it's innovation. It is about, thinking about new solutions, both in technologies, but also in financial ways. So really, refine what you have, but think about something that can get you to scale, untapping some of the pools of capital that are out there that have not been yet in the context of agriculture, land use, forestry, to really make sure that we are coming up with new solutions. But in addition to that, I fully agree. I think we do know that money is not flowing if the regulatory framework, if the policies, the domestic policies, the enabling environment is not there. So I think this is the 2 factors that are completely, for us key to make it happen. And again, we look forward to, helping on the part on the innovations. My colleague Juliana Sansao, who is at Puki in Rio and leads the team there, has been working a lot on the policy side. And we really look forward to, partnering with the coalition and everyone here in the room to help Brazil lead the way.
Thank you. Minister, please.
Ok, muito obrigado. Eu vou começar aqui pelo coisa que do Observatório do Clima. Ele me entregou aqui um inquérito, né, um negócio bastante extenso, e eu não tenho como responder você aqui ponto a ponto. Eu gostaria de debater contigo esses assuntos. Se preferir lá no gabinete em Brasília, quando for por lá, a gente marca. Ponto a ponto que foi colocado aqui, eu consigo explicar para você. Ponto a ponto. Não tenho nenhuma restrição de falar sobre qualquer um deles. Entendo a forma como, às vezes, é escrita, a forma agressiva, como, às vezes, é colocado algumas coisas, mas para tudo tem uma colocação, explicação. Eu fico feliz só que de ontem para hoje, de um evento que eu participei, morreram menos 150 ambientalistas de ontem para hoje. Ontem me falaram de 200, hoje é só 50. Então, já melhorou bem para o Brasil, mas nós vamos discutir ponto a ponto, não há problema nenhum. Com respeito às ADINs que estão colocadas no Supremo, o Ministério da Agricultura já foi chamado, ele já deu essa posição. Nós somos favoráveis à legislação que foi aprovada no Congresso Nacional, não poderia ser diferente. Uma legislação de quase 2 décadas discutindo para ser feita, com um avanço muito grande para o Brasil. Talvez não seja aquilo que os ambientalistas quisessem que fosse, e também não foi aquilo que os ruralistas queriam que fosse. Foi um consenso, ou melhor dizendo, foi o arranjo que nós podemos construir, e na democracia e na política é assim. A gente não vai aonde quer, chega onde é possível construir, foi construído, e é o que nós temos, e é o que nós temos que seguir daqui para frente, que eu acho que é o que coloca o Brasil numa posição de vanguarda. Ao cumprir o Código Florestal Brasileiro, nós vamos estar devolvendo ao meio ambiente alguns milhões de hectares de recuperação, de APPs, que inclusive está no documento aqui do Observatório do Clima, reclamando que nós ainda não fizemos. Mas as coisas são assim, elas são construídas, nós temos um tempo para fazer, e o governo vai fazer, a sociedade brasileira vai fazer, não tenho dúvida nenhuma disso. Com respeito, muito rapidamente também, para não tomar muito tempo, a questão de corrupção no Brasil, que foi colocado, diz o seguinte: a questão de corrupção no Brasil não é uma questão política, é uma questão de polícia, né? E a polícia, e o Ministério Público, os juízes, estão tomando frente disso e vão resolver o problema. O Brasil vai ser um outro país daqui para frente, não tenho dúvida nenhuma disso. Mas não é um assunto que cabe a nós ficar discutindo num local desse, e estamos discutindo o clima. Polícia é polícia, política é política. Eu não sei se ficou alguma coisa sem eu me manifestar, sem eu colocar, mas eu acho que isso que foi me pedido sobre a questão das perguntas colocadas. Nós não temos tempo para debater, eu adoraria, poderia ficar aqui um dia inteiro debatendo ponto a ponto, não tenho dificuldade nenhuma disso. O que eu consigo dizer, o que penso, eu vou dizer, o que eu não consigo dizer porque não tenho conhecimento, vou dizer também. Tenho uma equipe para me informar, uma equipe para me posicionar sobre um monte de coisas que tem. E, portanto, o Ministério da Agricultura está aberto. Convidei o João Campari, que fez parte a vida inteira relacionada à questão do meio ambiente, para que fosse no Ministério ser um assessor especial do ministro, para que pudesse me posicionar daquilo que vem acontecendo de todos os lados, para que a gente possa construir uma política muito mais clara, né? Eu até brinquei ontem com o ministro Sarney, até botei numa rede social minha, dizendo o seguinte: ao bater uma foto com o ministro Sarney, a maioria dos meus amigos escreveu o seguinte: cuidado com esse Sarney. Mas eu tenho certeza que a turma do Sarney falou a mesma coisa para ele: cuidado com esse Blairo Maggi. Quer dizer, mas, na verdade, nós queremos construir uma política que seja boa para o país, uma política que respeite os produtores rurais, que respeite o valor da produção brasileira, que respeite aquilo que o Brasil tem de melhor. E, claro, vamos respeitar as questões ambientais também, e eu vou construir, aliás, a minha vida tem mostrado assim, que eu tenho construído sempre, se não no consenso, mas na maioria, a saída para os graves problemas que o Brasil tem. Muito obrigado.
Obrigado, ministro. Everton, a gente está sendo convidado a sair da sala urgentemente. Eu vou pedir para você fazer uma coisa hiper rápida, por favor.
Muito bem, então, muito brevemente, eu também gostaria de dizer que, do ponto de vista do Ministério do Meio Ambiente, o fato de nós termos o ministro da Agricultura e o ministro do Meio Ambiente juntos numa COP de clima mostra abertura ao diálogo, mostra interesse em continuar essa conversa, que certamente não vai terminar aqui, e mostra a disposição do governo brasileiro a manter aberta essa interlocução com todos. Então, acho que essa é a principal mensagem até deste evento em si, e por aqui eu paro. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado. Então, agradeço. Thank you very much for the panel. Sorry for the rush, but we're being asked to leave the room. And thank you for the next panel.
This publication